In this segment, we're going to be talking about the various types of budgets that exist in local governments. First of all, let's start with a line item budget. This is a very detailed, financially oriented budget. It's kind of the historical basis that budgets started from. Many of us remember the green bar paper that those line item budgets could be printed on. It includes account codes and budget amounts, but not much more. And therefore, while this was the norm 20, 25 years ago, you don't see these much anymore because they really don't provide the kind of information that's necessary. A program budget is a different type that's really oriented around the kinds of things that an organization does. And here, the focus of the budget accounts is the various programs that you see them offer. Oftentimes, you'll see the financial aspects of a program summarized, say in the compensation, operating and maintenance expenses, things of that nature. But it's really structured around the program structure of the organization and not the financial structure. So this can be more helpful to really understand what kinds of things the organization is doing. A performance budget is much like a program budget before, but there's really a strong emphasis on the performance of the organization within the context of the programs. So the format can be very similar to a program budget, but it can really be focused more on performance metrics and things like performance measures, outcomes, and what's being accomplished within those programs themselves. And you'll sometimes see a performance budget structured in a financial sort of way around the financial organization, but more often than not, it's around the programs of the organization. These can be combined to create a hybrid, a kind of a mashup, if you will, where the emphasis continues to be on the operations of the organization, kind of what they do, with a program orientation, but again, a very strong performance element. So it's very common to see a program-oriented budget that focuses on performance and adds the financial element as a subset of that as well. We've heard a lot about zero-based budgeting, and in fact, it was very popular back in the 70s. It was made popular by a Harvard Business Review article in the 60s. And this caught, at the time, Governor Carter's eye, and it became President Jimmy Carter, and he used it both in Georgia and in the White House and kind of helped it become more popular. The idea being that you zero base at least certain, if not all, of the various kinds of expenses that an organization might have, so that every expense has to be rejustified, basically, from the ground up. Well, as you might guess, this is not always very practical. As a result, zero-based budgeting isn't very common anymore. What you do see from time to time is a form of zero base, where the zero base is focused on the kinds of expenditures that maybe are subject to a greater degree of scrutiny, say travel costs and things of that nature. Beyond that, you don't see it quite as much. Expenditure control budgets are kind of similar. What happens in an expenditure control budget is a certain metric is used to arrive at what should be a logical expenditure cap. And once that cap is established, then usually a lot of discretion is given as to what kind of expenses can occur within the cap at various levels of the organization. Again, you don't see this very often anymore, but it was a popular trend about probably 20 years ago. Every now and then you'll hear somebody refer to it as a way that they're going to sort of rebuild accountability within the budget. What's more common than any other form is incremental budgeting. And this is where you take last year's budget and you add or subtract a certain set amount, typically a percentage rate. Maybe it's tied to the cost of living adjustments or certain kinds of commodity price changes. Most governments find this to be very efficient to do. In addition to incrementing the budget by some set amount, which can be adjusted from one program to another, then you consider changes to that increment through what's called decision packages. And so each change to the increment is carefully scrutinized as a result. And again, you'll find that that's by far the most common, very likely the kind of budgeting you're going to see in your organization. Something that's emerging more recently is budgeting for results. And that's where the goals of the organization are identified, the end result is clarified in terms of what's intended to be the result of the activities of the organization. And then the budget is essentially created backwards from there. Those results are informed by strategies. How do you achieve those results? And those strategies are connected back to the programs and activities that the organization is involved in. And the funding for those programs and activities connected to those strategies, achieving those results, is sort of the structure of a budgeting for results kind of budget. And this is also similar to another form that we're now seeing more commonly as well, called the price of government. And this is made popular by a book that was recently published in the last 10 years by Osborne and Hutchison. And in fact, the book highlights the Washington State experience from 2002, when this approach was used by Governor Gary Locke. And this idea is that there's a certain price that a community is willing to pay, be that a city, a county, or a state in the case of the book. And that price then is kind of the expenditure cap, if you will, drawing back on that kind of budgeting. But then how do you decide what to spend those resources on? And that's where you see a budgeting for results kind of an approach. The priorities are identified through a community process, and the results around those priorities are then informed by strategies, and those strategies are informed by activities and programs. And so again, you can kind of see a bridge between the budgeting for outcomes and the price of government, kind of resulting in a budgeting for outcomes, price of government kind of a budget model that's becoming more and more popular with the more progressive communities.